Well, welcome to SPERO DEI, everybody, and I am so glad that you are here. Today we commemorate emancipation. Today is Juneteenth, and we are commemorating the day slaves were freed in America. We're also in the middle of Pride Month, and Pride Month is when we celebrate the liberation of the LGBTQIA plus community. So, isn't it good to be among the kind of Christian spirituality that celebrates this? I think it is. So wherever you're watching from today, welcome. My name is David Perez, and I'm the minister here at SPERO DEI, and I really appreciate you tuning in. You know, there is just so much going on in the world, isn't it? There's so much division, there's so much shifting. It's even happening in Western Christianity. This is actually one of the main reasons SPERO DEI exists. It's one of the main reasons some of you found us. Now, change or shifting, that can be hard, of course, because it's uncomfortable and it's uncertain. But I'm also here to say that change and evolution is a good thing. You know, when scholars look at the entire overall 2,000-year history, the arc of Christian history, it looks like the Christian church goes through a major shift about every 500 years. It happened in 500, it happened in 1,000, it happened in 1,500. And many observers think we're going through one of those now. I happen to agree with that. There's this eruption, there's this evolving of a new kind of Christianity. It hasn't abandoned its ancient and historic tradition, no way. But it is blossoming out of and from Western or American Christianity. Christianity has always blossomed and evolved out of something that needed to change. It's done that for 2,000 years. So if you like what we're about, if you like the approach we're taking, then you're part of that blossoming too. There must be something in you that's blossoming. So I want to say welcome. Welcome to SPERO DEI.
Separate your steadfast love, who can escape your faithfulness and endlessly, so full of grace and mercy. And we sing, God is so good. God is so good. God is so good. He's so good to me. Yes, He is so good. Oh, I'm haunted by the past no more, 'cause my innocence has been restored. Forgiveness flows from your veins, your kindness shown in all your ways. And we sing, God is so good. God is so good. Yeah, God is so good. He's so good to Christ alone. He's my rock, my shield, my cornerstone, and we say God is so good. God is so good. Yes, He is. God is so good. He's so good to me. I know God, He's so good. You're still good to me. I know that God, you're still good. You're so good to me.
Well, happy Juneteenth, everybody. And if you are unaware of the history behind Juneteenth, let me share it with you. You know, if you open up most history books, chances are it will point out the date, January 1st, 1863, the day Abraham Lincoln, with one proclamation, orders and declares that all persons held as slaves shall be free. Now, what these same history books may fail to mention is what actually happened to these words once they arrived on the shores of Galveston, Texas, more than 2 years after Lincoln wrote them. As you know, in the 1860s, news did not travel like it does now, and in 1865, months after General Robert E. Lee's surrender, word of the end of the Civil War had yet to even make it to Texas and its 250,000 slaves. But then came Gordon Granger's arrival in Galveston on June 19, 1865, along with General Order Number 3, all slaves are free, and Juneteenth was born. Now, while Juneteenth celebrations continued to varying degrees in the U.S. for decades, it would take until 1980 for Texas to become the first state to declare it a holiday. Today, 47 states recognize it, along with the District of Columbia, and a chapter of our history far too long left out of the books designed to document it is now remembered. Or Juneteenth, as the National Museum of African American History and Culture now calls it, our country's second Independence Day. So may you have a thoughtful, a very remembering, and a happy Juneteenth. Well, today I really want to give credit where credit is due and thank Reverend Debbie Thomas for an essay that she wrote back in 2019 that really inspired my words for today. In Luke chapter 8, there is this very peculiar story for a postmodern reader. The story is actually quite fantastic because the writer tells us it deals with a man possessed by a demon. It's like out of a movie. In this man who used to live a normal life and live in a house, now he lives in the local graveyard and he haunts the dead. Every night the townspeople can hear him shrieking among the tombs. When the people are quick enough, they grab him, they catch him, they wrap his wrists and ankles in chains, and then they haul his naked body back to town, securely shackled. But who knows, maybe some of them know him, maybe some of them remember him. But there's no containing this guy. He always ends up escaping, trailing chains behind him. He wanders the wild, he tears at his own skin until it bleeds. This poor guy just trades one pain for another. If he has a name, he no longer uses it. If he has a history, it's not relevant anymore. If he has a life worth living or saving, no one recognizes it anymore until Jesus gets out of a boat and this man marches angrily towards Jesus. So Jesus comes to him, and then in Luke 8, this is how it goes. Jesus asked the man, "What is your name?" And he answered, "My name is Legion." He said this because there were many demons in him. They begged Jesus not to send them to the deep pit where they would be punished. A large herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside. So the demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs. And Jesus let them go. And the demons left the man and went into the pigs. The whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and drowned. When the men taking care of the pigs saw this, they ran to spread the news in the town and on the farms. The people went out to see what had happened, and when they came to Jesus, they also found the man. The demons had gone out of him, and he was sitting there at the feet of Jesus. He had his clothes on, and he was in his right mind. But the people were terrified. Then all who had seen the man healed told about it. Everyone from Gerasa begged Jesus to leave because they were so frightened. Now, do you see what I mean? This story is a tough one for 21st century readers because it's full of details that we find really bizarre. Chatty demons, suicidal swine, instantaneous healing. I mean, isn't this the stuff of horror movies? And how is an ancient exorcism story relevant or good news to us? What does it have to do with us? Listen, lots of people try to address what contemporary Christians find anachronistic or troubling about this story. I mean, was the man really possessed? I mean, does that really happen? Maybe he was really mentally ill, but back in his day, they didn't know anything about mental illness or how the brain works or medicine. So maybe they just heaped all of their mysticism, and that's where they wrote their story from. And isn't there danger involved in conflating acute psychological suffering, mental illness, with demonic possession? We've seen the dangers of that. And if the demons were real, I mean, why did Jesus negotiate with them? Why did he even sort of show them mercy when they begged for it? And what about the poor pigs? Why did they have to die to secure this guy's liberation? I mean, doesn't Jesus care about the pigs? Doesn't Jesus care about animals? It seems like Jesus would have been a person for the ethical treatment of animals. It seems like Jesus would be a card-carrying PETA member. But in one fell swoop, these animals die. And then what about the pig herders? In one fell swoop, their entire economic welfare and livelihood disappears right into the lake. Now, these are valuable questions, and I wouldn't dismiss them. They're important to ask for the contemporary reader. But since it is an ancient story and such bizarre events are not part of our everyday lives, if we only try to figure out the stranger parts of the story, it might prevent us from seeing how it can be our story, a story for us here and now. In fact, this is why some of you even gave up on the Bible. And I get it. Because certain faith subcultures stressed an inflexible interpretation of the Bible. They stressed a literal interpretation of it. And they told you that if you can't get behind all of it, then you actually have none of it. And since nobody in one of those subcultures gave you the permission to think or to believe different, a lot of us just then walked away. But I'm inviting you to a more soulish, heart orientation reading of this story, to look for the trueness in the story and how that encourages your faith. Instead of thinking an old way, which is your faith tethered to literalism and absolutism, so you can't embrace a story like that. Look at it in a new way. And this is how we look at it at SPERO DEI. One of the things we say at SPERO DEI is this, that we take the Bible so seriously that there's no way that we can take it literally. That's too shallow of approach, because we think faith blossoms. So for me, what fascinates me about this story is the questions it asks and how relevant it is. Here's the first question I see in this story. Will you seek who you are really? In Luke chapter 8, Jesus says this. Jesus asked the man, "What is your name?" He answered, "My name is Legion." He said this because there were many demons in him. This is what the name Legion means. Now, first, I think the story is our story because it begins precisely where we need to begin. And it's this wonderful question, what is your name? Jesus asks this when he first encounters the guy. Remember, the man first approaches Jesus, probably not to ask for help, but to actually push Jesus away or to confront him, maybe even to scare Jesus. But most likely his approach is violent, it's aggressive. But when Jesus collides with him, Jesus asks him, what is his name? He brings the man to his beginning. He's trying to awaken him to who he really is, his humanity, his beginnings, to awaken him to his unique and precious identity as someone who is loved by God. So what is your name? I mean, has there ever been a more loving question? I mean, what would happen if we just allowed in our spiritual lives, allowed God to ask us to really probe, okay, who are you really? I mean, the real you. What would happen if you actually asked that of the people that you love? Who are you really? Tell me. I want to know. I want to see the real you, the vulnerable you. I mean, beneath the labels and the diagnosis, the pretense, the wrong conclusions and assumptions, the piety, beyond the fear and shame, who are you? Who are we really? What name do you yearn to be called in the lonely stretches of your life? Who were you before you lost yourself, before you conformed yourself to someone else's expectations, before a rigid religion told you who to be, before something vital in you died? I mean, do you even remember who you really are? Have you awakened to that? And Jesus begins where we must begin, with an honest questioning and naming of ourselves. I mean, can we allow our attachment to God, our faith, to search such a deep and tender question? Can we, in a sense, have a relationship with God where we just experience God wanting to know who we really are, transform us, and be who we really are? So who do you really want to be? What is your real name? Now here's another question that kind of makes the story ours today, and it's this. Will you wake up to reality? because reality is always better than the miracle. You know, I believe this story is our story, but because it tells us the unflinching truth about the reality of our life and condition. Legion, this man says, that's his name, that's his response to Jesus' question. My name is Legion, which means a multitude, a vast host, an incalculable swarm. That's what his name means. Why? Because this man has felt tormented by many demons for so long. Perhaps a more contemporary way to understand this is it's a myriad of things that are breaking this guy. It's a myriad of things that burden his mind, his emotions, his body, his circumstances, his soul. It's multifaceted, and it comes with several things braided together. So, regardless of what language we use, kind of old world, biblical, very churchy, theological, medical, sociological, psychological, we know for sure that this person's condition, it strips him of his agency, his sanity, his worth, his dignity, strips him of his relationships and his community. His reality has kept him, he's isolated. He's now anonymous. His soul is deadened, and he's on this path to self-destruction. I mean, does any of this make sense to you? And here's what our reality is. What ails us in our own human experience is the same. It's legion. It's a legion of burdens and brokenness that haunt us, at times with many faces, with many names. We are all, every one of us, we're all vulnerable to these things that can kind of possess our life and rob us of our true name, that can breach and interrupt our attachment to God and to each other. Listen, here are some of the legions we experience. Some of us suffer from depression and anxiety. Some of us are addicted to alcohol or to work or to image. Some of us are enslaved to social media and information. Some of us are just prone to bitterness or caught up in defending our rightness. Some of us can't shake traumatic and abusive memories. Some of us experience our skin colors, our accents, our genders, our sexualities as magnets for other people's hatred. Some of us suffer an illness that just kind of crisscrosses the boundaries of medicine. Some of us know exactly what St. Paul is talking about when he says, what I want to do, I don't end up doing, and the very thing I don't want to do, I do. So for me, I've had to ditch this horror movie idea of possession. Unless, of course, I'm watching a real horror movie, then it's fun. I like it. But in reality, it's really a legion of things that possess us, that can unattach us spiritually, that can mire our emotions, that can create unhealthy coping mechanisms. And if we can see it that way, if we can see the reality of that, then that's how this story becomes relevant. So wake up to reality, because it actually is better than this saving miracle. Let me encourage you to face reality, to deal with reality, because it's when you deal and face reality when your spiritual life transcends and you see it transform you. But this is not where the story ends. Here's the third question that jumps out at me. Will you and I attune to the rhythms of a dynamic God? Will we let go of a static God? This is really the third reason to consider this story our story. It's because it reveals something that we must confront in ourselves and in our spiritual faith. And I think this story does it without hesitation or apology. Look at this in Luke 8:35. People went out to see what had happened. They came to Jesus and found the man sitting there at the feet of Jesus. The man had clothes on and was in his right mind. The demons were gone. This made the people afraid. So this man is transformed, isn't he? To something brand new? No. That would be conversion to something else. No, this man transforms into who he really is, who he always has been. He is transformed into his true self. And are the people welcoming of that? Do they like that? No, they are afraid. And Jesus and his dynamic power affects all of that. It is through this person's encounter with Christ that change and transformation are then possible. So Jesus and his ability to heal, which means his ways are new to them, and something new always upsets what is normal. It's not very comfortable for them, and they're very frightened by it. So how this story becomes relevant is that it poses that question. Will you and I attune to a dynamic God and let go of a static God? And to be true to ourselves, it means we are dynamic. We are not static. We change, we evolve. And for some, that notion is scary, isn't it? And the idea that if God changes, that is scary. But God is not static. God is dynamic. Not long ago, I was in a conversation with someone, and I was telling them my thoughts on this, and I was telling them because of why I left the rigid doctrines of evangelicalism. And when they heard this, they, of course, went right to the book of Hebrews, and they quoted me Hebrews 13:8. David, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Now, when someone uses this verse to make their point that God doesn't change, therefore Christianity can't change or evolve, they are always starting with a presumptive point. And the presumptive point is this, that sameness, Jesus is the same. Sameness means unchanging or static. Now, that's a presumptive point going into the reading beyond anything the verse says about sameness. It doesn't say. Now, what do I mean? Well, let me try to give you a ridiculous illustration to make my point. Let's say that you were developed by a certain Christian theology that said God is green, or God's nature is green. And then I come up to you and I say, I think God is multifaceted when it comes to colors. I think God is actually more like a rainbow of colors. Then for you to unprove my point, you quote me this verse. You say, David, Jesus Christ is the same color green yesterday, today, and forever. So God's colors can never be a rainbow. So if somebody begins already that sameness means stasis, then that's how they're going to build a doctrine around that presumptive thought. But it also works in reverse too, wouldn't it? I mean, if you start with God as dynamic, then God's dynamism is changeless, which will always be the case yesterday, today, and forever. And to make my point even further, many commentaries also associate sameness with presence, not a parked, fixed, undeviating nature, but that God's presence is with you there always. God's presence is there constant. It is there yesterday, it is there today, and it will be there with you tomorrow. And I'm not proof texting one verse to make my point. I think the entire scriptures reveal that God is dynamic. It's all throughout. I think the universe reveals that God is immense and dynamic and changing and expanding. Quantum physicists expounding on the expanding universe, they sound like deeper theologians than a seminary professor talking about 5-point Calvinism is what the Bible teaches. I think our own humanity shows that God is dynamic. I mean, talk to a molecular biologist, talk to a cultural anthropologist, talk to a moral psychologist. They will sound like deeper theologians than some biblical theologian defending penal substitutionary atonement. You see, the power of this ancient story, it's not in determining whether you land on the facts of it, but whether you and I can see the trueness in it for us today in these questions. Will you seek who you really are? Will you recognize the legion of things that at times possess us and take us away from our true selves, from our true name? Will you wake up to reality? Because it's in reality and through reality that healing happens, not supernatural miracles, but God working through reality. And will you attune to a dynamic God who changes, who evolves, and that's how we're transformed. Listen, when the townspeople were exposed to all this, they remained afraid and they stayed in stasis. But it was the man with a legion of possessions who was liberated that day. So will you and I run after uncomfortable freedom? Listen, if we want to be free, if we want to be liberated, it is sometimes uncomfortable. And to be free of something that's challenging, it will always challenge our status quo. Because sometimes as humans, sometimes we prefer to stick to the demons we know, rather embrace the freedoms we don't know, because it's scary. Sometimes we just need things to be wrong so we can feel right. Sometimes it means we stay shackled in chains that bind so many of us. And we blame other things, but they're really instruments of our own making. Sometimes we have these coping mechanisms that are unhealthy, that keep us unattached. Maybe the gospel brings peace, but maybe it doesn't always bring peace. Maybe it brings up evil, and it messes with our moral categories. It messes with our economic comforts. It messes with our social structures. It messes with our theological rigidity in ways that we find scary, sometimes offensive. But it also means that when resurrection comes into our life, it wakes us up a bit and lets us know not to stay dead, but to wake up. And this story ends with Jesus commissioning this changed man to stay among the unchanged townspeople. The same townspeople who feared him, who shunned him, who trapped him, who shackled him for years. And to bring change to the very faith that he thought he could never change. And the same with us. So when this new Christianity is erupting, when it's erupting in you, it is speaking through you. So yes, this is a peculiar movie-like story. And instead of trying to determine it as factual, see the trueness in it. What is your name? What is the true name you want to have? Will you and I wake up to the reality around us versus always looking for a supernatural change? It's through reality that we spiritually change. And will we attune ourselves and attach ourselves to a God who is dynamic, a God who evolves and changes, a God who evolves and changes our faith because it's blossoming. And when we embrace this, just like the man who is freed of the legions, we will experience spiritual and personal liberation. God, I pray that we would just awaken to the trueness in this story, that you want to know our name. You don't necessarily want to convert us into something new. You long to see something awakened in us, who we have always been. The prodigal son did not become someone new. He returned home to who he had always been. And so, God, may we see our real name. May we pursue who we really are. This is when we are the most spiritual. Instead of dropping to our knees and asking for supernatural deliverance, may we face our reality and see a spiritual God and spiritual life, transcend in and grow from that. And when change is scary, and like the townspeople, when we want to hook and stay with our static stasis life in God, we'll just stay bound up and chained. So may we move and attune our lives to a dynamic God and a dynamic spiritual life that forever blossoms. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Happy Pride Month, SPERO Day. We're Sarah and Carmen, and we've been coming to SPERO Day for almost a year now. And what really got me excited about coming to SPERO Day was, the second we walked in, we met Miss Tammy, and she welcomed us with open arms. And we have been encouraged to be a part of so many things at SPERO Day. We are truly welcomed, and we belong just as we are. We didn't come with any intention that we have to walk in one way and leave the next. This has been a safe space for us to ask questions and to learn, and we've met so many friends here. It has been an incredible journey for both of us.
Yeah, I think the feeling of being able to walk in holding hands and as a couple and be seen as that and accepted and loved as that has been a really great way for our story to find a home here. And feeling like not only as a couple but as individuals we are accepted for who we are and loved for who we are and wanted for who we are, wanting to serve or to participate or go out to lunch with friends afterward. And I think that has been a huge piece for both of us. And then just for us to know that we can be together and still belong has been so important.
And so that's our wish for you guys, is that no matter whether you're alone, whether you're here with somebody, whether you're gay, straight, bisexual, trans, wherever you fall on that line, we hope that your story finds a home here at SPERO Day. Happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride Month.
Sit there while I tell you just how beautiful you look tonight. As if you haven't heard me say it about 100 times. You shake your head and look away. I promise that I've tried my hardest to let go of this, but every time I think about a world without you in it, darker shade of gray. Hey, hey, and all I wanna do is make you smile. When darkness still ensues, I wanna be alive. Whatever we go through, I'll make it worth your while. 'Cause every minute, every hour, every day, I wanna make you smile. Stand and keep on staring while I tell you that you're all I need. And even though I know you know that I'm a fighting breed, I'm gonna keep on showing you exactly what I mean.
I've got a question for you. Did you ever wonder what to say or not to say to a gay person? Well, I get it. I'm Chuck Long, and I'm a member here at SPERO DEI. I'm also a member of the LGBTQIA community at SPERO DEI, and it's a very special community. I've heard those questions. I've heard people say things like, oh, I can tell they're gay by the way they walk, or I can tell they're gay by the way they talk, or I can tell they're gay by the way they decorate. It can be awkward. I know people aren't trying to be facetious, but there are just some ways that you can present things, that you can say things that we're going to get to at a very special event here at SPERO DEI. It's called How to Be an Ally. You can bring your friends, bring your family members, come and ask the questions. Don't worry about awkward questions. That's what we're going to do. We're going to converse about that. It's Wednesday, June 22nd, 6:30 p.m. right here at SPERO DEI. And there is no question that's going to be off limits. We don't want you to worry about, oh, I'm afraid I'm going to say the right thing or the wrong thing. That's what it's about. It's about the journey. It's about getting there. We hope to see you.